Today what I want to do is I want to continue with the topic of Mashiach. It's part 2. We're going to continue what we started discussing last week, although we're going to build on a couple of different ideas. And I want to just remind everyone, as well mentioning that the Spring-Summer Series Shiurim are in memory of Mrs. Edith Nisbam, Frumit Bat Yosef Allah Shalom Zichron Livracha. So here's my question. What will be Mashiach's resume? I mean, here's a guy, right? What will he accomplish? What is he going to do? And question number 2 is, what is life going to look like? We touched on this last week, but we didn't fully develop that. And those are the 2 aspects. And by the way, these 2 questions aren't even necessarily related. They could be related, but they're not necessarily related. So what I want to do is, I want to look at source number 1. I want to read it with you. And I want you to tell me, based on these psukim, how would you answer question 1, Mashiach's resume, and how would you answer question 2, what will life be like? Based on these psukim. And again, I'll give a loose translation. Okay, so here we go. So we're reading from the 11th parak in Yeshayahu. Vayatza choter migeza Ishai. So a honey will sprout from the geza, from the branch of Ishai. Now, Ishai is referring to, what's Ishai? David ben Ishai. Okay. V'nitzir mishar shavifra. Right? And it will sprout and it will flourish. V'nacha alav ruach Hashem. So the Spirit of God will dwell upon him. Ruach chokhmah uvina. A spirit of intelligence and insight. Ruach eitzah ugvura. A spirit of, eitzah is advice, and gvura is heroism. V'ruach da'at yirat Hashem. So again, the spirit of knowledge and fear of God. V'harichol b'yirat Hashem. And those who could take a whiff, right? You could smell, right? The yirat Hashem. V'lo l'marei nav yishpat. V'lo l'mishumaz nav yochiach. Right? He's not just going to decide things on a whim. He's not going to look at something and say, okay, innocent, guilty, right? No. He's going to do it, meaning, what's the idea here? He'll use his knowledge and his insight to render judicial decisions in order to be able to reach some type of decision-making process. V'shafat b'tzedek dalim, and he's going to judge with fairness. So with righteousness, dalim are the poor, right? Dal evyon, right? The poor. There's a better word for poor, the impoverished. V'ochiach b'mishor l'anvei haaretz. So again, this is judicial, and the second half, v'hikat eretz b'shevet piv, and he will smite the land. A shevet is a staff, with his staff of his mouth. So this is a very interesting. What does it mean to literally smote the land with the staff of his mouth? What is it? Uveruch vasav yamit rasha, and again, he'll be able to destroy the wicked with the ruach vasav, with the spirit again of his lips. V'hayat tzedek ezor mosna, v'emunah ezor chalatzav. Okay? Now, that continues at the end of the resume. And again, very poetic. Now, here's the second half. This is a description of life. V'gar ze'ev mkaves, and the wolf will lie down with the lamb. V'namer im gedi yibrat, v'eger ufri umri yachta, v'na'ar katon noheg bam. Again, we've seen these psukim before. We're familiar with them. We know they are written on the side of the United Nations, right? In English. Ufarav v'dov terena yachtav yirbatzem yeledehem v'aryeh kavakar yochal teven v'shasha yonek al chur. Okay, fine. And again, it describes the. Now let's look at the last pasuk. Lo yareu v'lo yashitu ba'chol har kodeshi. There will not be the sense of wickedness and or destruction in the entire mountain of sanctity, my holy mountain. Ki why? Ki malaretz. Because the land will be filled. Ki malahar de'at Hashem. Because the land will be filled with the knowledge of God. Kamayim layam machasim. Literally from one end to the other. Okay. So here we go. How would you, using these psukim, how would you describe Mashiach's resume? What would you say about his resume?
Judge.
He's going to be a judge. Okay. So he's going to have some type of judicial responsibility.
He's a Navi.
Why do you say he's a Navi? Okay, very good. The Rambam will say this. I think he's going to have the status of, he's going to be a Navi, he's going to be a Shofet. What else?
We might think that we shouldn't let them dopen.
What else?
That's what this Ruach is going to have.
So it's a good question, right? So what does it mean to have Ruach Hashem? Ruach Chachma V'dat, right? So the Spirit of God. Maybe that makes him a Navi? Divine, and the sense of like divine component to him. Spirit of God.
Well, he spent a certain amount of time as a shepherd because, for obvious reasons.
Because that's like what other people did, right? That's part of the resume of the Torah. Okay, maybe he's a shepherd. Yeah. Well, could you argue that these psukim should not be taken literally? That's allegorical. Does he have to have a, shall we say, a real title called judge? Or no. Just, he'll be like a fair, righteous guy. That's so crazy to make such a statement?
I mean, the word menacha doesn't necessarily imply that. I mean, the menacha could be at the time, like when he's revealed to be Mashiach, or it could be from.
Okay, the menacha, right? Wait a minute. There'll be a sense of divine spirit upon him.
Right, that doesn't mean that had to be part of his life before.
Right, not necessarily. Okay, good. Maybe only that time. Now, what about? Will he be a military man? Now, but it's interesting. Look at the language. He'll destroy the wicked, but how will he destroy the wicked? Through speech, not necessarily through military prowess or with physical might. So we see, it's interesting. If you're going to tell me, by the way, I don't really understand this. How do you do that? How do you destroy wicked people through speech?
Their spirit of wickedness.
How? How would you accomplish defeating evil through speech?
Making them turn good.
How? Through?
Making them good.
Persuasion.
Yeah.
Through speech is through act, right? Not through the sword. No. So it appears that the Navi isn't necessarily going to yield any type of military fortitude or talent, but rather he'll be a phenomenal orator. The art of persuasion. Okay, that's gonna be important. Very interesting. And what about the second half? The classic line, the gar ze'evim keves, where all these animals will lie down with each other. I'll remind you of the, I think I told this last week, right? But St. Nick in a zoo in St. Petersburg, he wanted to demonstrate all revolutions wanted to see themselves as Messianic, by the way, if you take a look historically. And so the Russian Revolution in the 19th century was, Stalin, so St. Nick built a zoo. And in the zoo, he wanted to show there's a biblical zoo, that it's the Messianic era. So what did he do? He put an exhibit that had Vigar, Ze'ev, and Keves, where the lamb was with the wolf. And they said to him, how do you accomplish this? That's unbelievable. You're really accomplished Messianic time. Here's the proof. So what did he say? It's very simple. Every day I put in 2 lambs. Right? And by the day there's only 1 left. Right? So that's how we accomplished it. So the question is this a pasuk that should be taken literally? For Garzev from Keves? Is it something which the Messianic era will have this almost a sense of tranquility among the animal kingdom? Or how else maybe could you understand this pasuk? So again, if you take it literally, there's going to be this utopian type of world where a gar ze'ev im keves, which doesn't happen today. Did you see the video clip last week in South Africa? The person that was mauled to death. They went on a South African safari, whatever, in the Cougar. What's it called? Cougar Park. Don't hear South African connections? How's it possible? We talked to 3 Jews in Toronto, and no one's connected to South Africa. That's unbelievable. So there was a Cougar Park last week in South Africa. So there was a YouTube clip of a lady who's literally mauled to death by, I guess, a tiger. Lion, tiger, I don't know, whatever it is. And people were like, oh my goodness, this is terrible, it's so dangerous. And then when they investigated, they realized what'd she do? She was like a bit of an adventurous type of person. And the tiger was approaching her vehicle, and she took a picture, But the picture wasn't a clear picture because she had her window closed. So she rolled down her window, literally this far away from a tiger, and snapped the picture in his eyes. Now that did not get the tiger. I guess the tiger, had some type of reaction to having a flash in his eyes, and he literally reached over and mauled the lady. Yeah, she killed her. Yeah, I don't know if she ever was meant to snap that picture. I'm not sure. Maybe she did. I don't know if she had time even for it. So the Google Park says, apparently everywhere, close your doors, lock your doors, keep your windows rolled up at all times, no matter what. So there you go. They actually mean what they say. People actually mean what they say, and they say what they mean. So anyways, why am I telling you all this? Because in the times of the Messianic era, in this psuki, Vigar Ze'evim Adam, Im Kevas, right? So what exactly is going on here? Okay, so I want to show you a very important Gemara. Says the Gemara in source number 2. It's a Gemara in Brachos. V'amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba amar Rabbi Yochanan kol hanevi'im kulan lo nitabu ela yemos HaMashiach. So here's a very important fact. As we touched on last week, you have to understand there are different stages. We are talking about Yemos HaMashiach. Do not confuse that with Olam Haba. Totally different. We'll get to, maybe, Olam Haba next week and the week after. Right? I'll take a survey. He's going to be around the next few weeks. But this is very important to understand that not all, but many, for sure the Rishonim, in particular also the Gemara says, when we read the Psukim Yeshayahu and other various Nevuos, it's not describing Olam Haba. It's describing Moshe Mashiach. So, why? Because Aval Olam Haba, Ayin lo rasa lo kacha zulasacha, Elokim zulasacha. No one knows Olam Haba. The Nevi'im could not even describe Olam Haba. Okay? Ayin lo rasa, right? The eyes, we don't know it. Only God knows what's going to happen. So again, we know very little about Olam Haba. But Moshe Mashiach, we have descriptions of. Upligi d'Shmuel. And this is a machlok Shmuel. Now this is generally understood by most of the Rishonim. And Shmuel disagrees and argues we do know about Olam Haba, and Nevi'im do speak about Olam Haba. Okay? And what does Shmuel argue? Shmuel says no. Yemos HaMashiach, there's only one difference. What's the difference? Ein bein holam hazel Mashiach ela shi'abud malchuyos b'vayin. What is the only difference between Yemos Mashiach and today? Shi'abud malchuyos. So what does that mean? Shi'abud malchuyot.
Love sovereignty.
Right? Okay, so they won't have the sense of political enmity. You won't have the sense of political tension. There'll be the kingdoms of the world, the foreign nations of the world will live in some type of unified type of existence. As it says, Ki lo yachdal avyon mekaretz. What do you mean? I have a question. What does the pasuk Ki lo yachdal avyon mekaretz have to do with in ben olam hazeh Mashiach ela shebur mocheh b'van? Why is this proof? Oh yeah, by the way, there's always going to be a poor person. Lo yachdal avyon mekaretz. There always will be a poor person. Why does that have to do with in ben olam hazeh Mashiach ela shebur mocheh b'van? Why is that proof?
It's not going to be a perfect utopian world. There's going to be a good person. There'll be poor people.
Okay, meaning, therefore, life will be normal. Meaning, they'll be very good. When the pasuk says "Lo yachtal avyon kevaretz," that means even during Yemos HaMashiach, there still be poor people. How do I know? What's the pasuk in the Torah? So don't tell me there'll be this utopian, lovey-dovey type of world. It's not true in Yemos HaMashiach. There might be a sense politically there'll be change. Maybe the borders will be broken down. They won't have the sense of right, but don't tell me that we're all going to live in this type of like the 60s world. You know what I mean, right? Of love. It's simply not true. There'll even be poor people in the Moshe Mashiach. Who explains it this way? That's what Rashi says. Flip your page for a minute. Take a look at. A Rashi that didn't make it. Sorry. Wait, Rashi says it. Lo yachtav yom kavaras. Should have been there. Says Rashi, exactly that. That there'll even be poor people in times of Yemos Mashiach. Okay. What does the Rambam hold? Take a look at source number 3. We are going to jump down to, let's read Halacha Aleph and Halacha Bet in Perek Yud Aleph and Halacha Malachim. HaMelech HaMashiach Atid La'amor L'achzir Malchus David Yoshnal B'Mishal B'Rishonah. So again, this is more his resume. What's his resume looking like? His resume is 1. L'achzir, he has to bring back this original kingdom. I think we saw this last week too, right? Ubonei Hamikdash Binyan Beis Hamikdash Mekabetz Nitchei Yisrael, gather in the nations of the world. V'chozrin kol mishpatim b'yamav kshem mikodem. He has to bring back the laws like they used to be. Ma'akrivim karbanot v'osim shmitin v'yovlod k'chol mitzvatam rabbatorah. Last week we dealt extensively with the next 2 phrases, so we're not going to deal with it today. Last week we spoke about what does it mean, kol mishe'enu mamin bo or mishe'enu mechakel l'biyato. So that we dealt with last week. I don't want to touch on it now. Okay. So again, we see here that what's his resume? What's he going to need to accomplish? He's going to need to do these 5 or 6 things. Now, if he builds a Beis Hamikdash, gathers in the nations of the world, has some type of returning to religious law, re-kicks and restarts the sacrificial offerings, and Shemitah and Yovel return. That's what he's going to accomplish. Let's skip down 2 lines. Actually, we're done. That's what he needs to accomplish. Let's go to Halacha Gimel. Ve'al yalel datcha shamach Mashiach tzarich lasot otot u'moftim. Don't think the Melech HaMashiach is going to do miracles. Not true. U'mechadesh dvarim ba'olam. He's not going to start offering chidushim. U'mechayem eitim v'zeh d'melo. Not true. Ein hadavar kach. Simply not true. The Melech HaMashiach will be a person who is going to do and live a normal life. Again, he's going to do Makabeth Nitchei Yisrael and Bonei Yerusha. But the guy is going to be a human being. He's not going to be a magician. He's not going to be a sorcerer. He's not going to... No. Let's continue reading. He says, after all, he's going to look at Rabbi Akiva. What's he going to prove? Who did Rabbi Akiva think was Mashiach? Bar. He was the schlepper of Ben Koziva, was Bar Kochba. Because I'll tell you proof, says the Rambam. Bar Kochba, did he make any miracles? No. So the Rambam says, Rabbi Akiva, who I think knew what was going on, who was a Tana, and he said Bar Kochba was Mashiach. So here's the problem, guys. If Bar Kochba, he thought Bar Kochba was a Mashiach. Now, was he? No. But he thought he was. How long? For a week? For a month? For a year? For a couple of years? I have no idea. But he thought it was Mashiach. Not only that, everyone thought he was. It was not just Rabbi Akiva. It was Kol Chachmei Doro. It wasn't all the sages of the time. Imagine today, everyone today says, Ruvain's a Mashiach. Who says it? The Agudah, the RCA, the literatures, the Bostoners, the Bezalel. What?
I met a guy in Israel named Ruben.
Who else thought he was Mashiach? So again, you don't have to think Mashiach. Other people, right?
So how's he going to establish himself?
Okay, good question. So he's going to have to accomplish all these things. He's going to have to do all. He's going to have help, He can do all this himself, but he'll lead it.
Needed a nation.
There you go. Ad sheneharag bavanot. But then Bar Kochba died. He was killed. Since he was killed, they realized he's not the right guy. Now, that doesn't mean Mashiach's going to live forever. What does it mean? The Mashiach needs to die. He died more.
I'm saying Mashiach will need to die naturally.
Oh, very good. Excellent. Very good. There's a lot of people made that diuk in the Rambam. That he'll die not. If he's Neherag, he's not Mashiach. If he dies on his own, he can still be Mashiach. Very good. Excellent diuk, Mitch. Wonderful. That's what a lot of people want to say in this Rambam. Right? No one asked him, hey, Bar Kochba, give us an ot, give us some of your Mashiach. Shatara hazot chuka mishpateha lo'olam u'lo'melamim. Says the Rambam, the laws of the Torah are forever. Ki lo yechdal av yom ikav haaretz. Quotes basically from Shmuel. Ve'ein mosifin alehem lo yigdurim mehem. You can't add to mitzvot. You can't take away from mitzvot. They're forever. Ve'chol mosif o gorea o shegala panim b'Torah v'tzid dvarim shal mishpatan b'pshutan harei zeh bevadai rasha nepikores. Says the Rambam, if a guy gets up and says, I'm Mashiach, and by the way, tefillin, waste of time. Then we know he's not Mashiach, says the Rambam. Because why? The mitzvot are forever. Now, this is one of the things that we know in the false Messiah. There's a Shabtai Tzvi. You ever heard the famous Shabtai Tzvi, the false Messiah? One of the things that people realized that he wasn't really the Messiah when he said to everybody, here's why I became Muslim by the end. But when he started telling people, and even though he performed miracles, the moment he told people about that halacha changed, that already it began to crumble. His whole Mashiach persona. And why? Because the Rabbi clearly writes, the Mashiach is not going to change anything in terms of mitzvahs. No miracles. Now, by the way, is it asur for him to provide miracles? No. That's why people say in the Rabbi. The Rabbi says they don't ask him, but he could. You follow? Right? No one's going to ask him, say, Mashiach, would you make the chair levitate? No one's going to ask him. He could. You hear the difference? He could, but he's not going to have to provide miracles in order to be Mashiach. Now, we have to continue reading because we're going to see something which is shocking. Okay, the Ravid says on this, okay, fine. Okay, next. Let's go on. Halacha Daled. V'im yam, again, this is the sheet of the Rambam. Im yamod melech mi Beit David. So now we have a king from the house of David. Hogaba Torah. V'osek mitzvah kid David aviv. So again, we're continuing now with his resume. So we have to see what he has to accomplish, right? So I guess you can see there's two different things. There's the resume, and then when he potentially gets the job, or might get the job, he has to accomplish certain things, right? So what we just read was what he's going to accomplish, right? Those are the things that were listed in the beginning of Halacha Aleph. Halacha Gimel tells us, listen, I want you to tell something, says the Rabbi. This is what it's going to be, not supernatural. And then Halacha Daled is, okay, let me tell you what the characteristics, this is more, I guess, the real resume of what he's going to need to get even his foot in before he can accomplish all those things. Or shall we say, even if you accomplish all those things, but you don't have the right resume, you still are not Mashiach. So you can have a guy who can build the base of Mikdash, but if he doesn't have Halacha Daled, he's not the Mashiach. What are they? So what will the Mashiach have? You have to be engaged in Torah and mitzvahs. Kefi haTorah shebichtav u'shabal peh. V'yachuf kol Yisrael elechpav lechazek bodka. That you, if you're able to get the Jews to follow Torah mitzvah. V'yilachem milchamot Hashem. Now he's going to fight the wars of God. Now, is that literal or is that figurative?
Milchamot Hashem are not necessarily.
It's back to Rosh Hashanah.
Okay, very good. It could be Rosh Hashanah. Very good. Excellent. Okay, so here we go. Step one is, this is a very important dig. The Rambam says, if there's a person who's osek b'Torah, right, convinces people to return to Yiddishkeit, it appears, fights the wars of God, again, not necessarily with the sword, with his mouth. He's the status of Chezkat Mashiach, meaning, what does it mean? What's a chazaka? Someone has a chazaka. What does that mean? Chazaka, this is kosher. Now, is it vada? Is it for sure? No. Can we eat food that has a chazaka that's kosher? Sure we can. If you own your house because of a chazaka, do you own the house? Yeah, sure you can. But if I come up, I challenge your chazaka, I have a deed from the city. Kobe, been in this house for 3 years. It's my house. So it's a chazaka that it's yours. If I come up and I produce a document from the city that says 43 view mount, whatever year. 62. The 62 view mount belongs to Greenberg, and it's from the city. It's a legit document, right? Then guess what? Bye. He has a chazaka, it's his. But if I have a star, that's a real star, right? That's signed, then I could uproot even a chazaka, right? So chazaka is what we go by. Unless we, I'll give you an example. There's the halacha is, you have to check your tzitzis every day to see if they're kosher. Check your tzitzis every day to see if they're kosher? Halacha is, right? Should. Maybe they got ripped overnight. You don't know. But what happens if you're rushing? This is more, we'll use this at talis as an example because it's more a rushing thing. Like you could be rushing with it, tzitzis too, right? You get there in the morning to shul, you put your talis on because you're running late. Ideally, you should check your tzitzis every day. Make sure they're not tangled, make sure they're not ripped, make sure they're not torn, because if it's not kosher, kosher. But if you don't have time, you can still make a bracha on it. Why? Chazaka. It was kosher yesterday. What are the chances that, is it likely that in the last 24 hours it ripped? No. Could it happen? Of course it could. But a chazaka that's kosher, what's chazaka mean? What would then change a chazaka? If I actually check my tzitzis and I see that 6 of the strings broke off, so that would say that my chazaka falls apart. Why? Because I have a Thomas Ayin. I see that it's not kosher. Right? So otherwise, you want to. So what's the Rambam saying here? This is a chazaka. This is Mashiach. This is what he's doing. He's a cheskas Mashiach. He's not Mashiach bevadai. He's a chazaka. He's Mashiach. So far, so good.
You need something to overturn it.
You don't overturn it. So let's continue. What could overturn it? Imasavi hitzliach. V'nitzech kol umot shebesaviv. U'baneh hamigdash bimkomo. V'kabes nidchei Yisrael. Hareze Mashiach bevadai. So again, you have the resume, which is halacha dalet. Then he says, which makes you a chazka for the Rambam. And then you're a vadai Mashiach if you accomplish everything that was outlined in halacha aleph, which was repeated by the Rambam here. Then, vadai Mashiach. So let's go back. When Rabbi Akiva says that Rakoch was Mashiach, let's reinterpret it using the language of the Rambam. What did he really mean? That he was B'cheska Mashiach. Because he had the right resume. And he was on the way to accomplishing, perhaps, everything. But he stopped in the middle. So he was an example of Cheska Mashiach, but never turned into a Vada Mashiach. That's going to be a very important chiluk, because we're going to talk about certain movements that exist in the Jewish world today, right?
So long as there are any Jews living outside of Israel,
it
can never be a Vada.
Very good. Excellent. Right. Did I miss something? Was Beis Midrash built? I don't think so. So there could never be an Vada Mashiach. Because Beis Midrash is in order to get the stamp of Vada Mashiach, should build the Beis Midrash. Right.
And have everyone together.
I gather everyone together. And again, what exactly? V'nitzech kol ha'motzaviv, victorious over the nations of the world. So again, is that through yielding a sword? It could be. It could be that he's a military might, or through political whatever it is. Either way you look at it, as far as I know, neither were accomplished. Right? Unfortunately. Okay. Now, if he doesn't make and finish everything, or neherag, or he gets killed, Mitch's deal, as opposed to dies naturally. And he's not the person that the Torah promised about and described, and rather, harehu, listen to this language, gentlemen. And this person, this guy who's a Cheska Mashiach, falls under the category of any other great king of Israel. ולא העמידו ברוך הוא אלא לנסות בו רבים שנאמר מן השקלים יחשלו לצרוף בהם לברר ולבן עד הקץ כי עוד מועד. Now, this continues the Rambam. You should know, why was he sent? He was sent maybe to fool the people, to test the people, and sometimes people stumble. Now, the next part of the Rambam was edited, meaning it does not appear in your classic older editions of the Rambam because it was censored by the printing press. The classic standard editions of the Rambam that we use are from the 16th century, except for the new ones that are printed, which are located over there, the Shamsi Franco Rambam and Most new editions of the Rambam include this censored part, and they were censored simply because, well, you'll see why. You'll read the next few words, you'll realize right away why. In the Christian world, they censored. In the Muslim world, they didn't care about censorship so much. So here's the part that was censored. Af Yeshua, Af Yeshu HaNotzri. Now you understand why it was censored. Even Jesus, the Nazareth, Shedime Shemashiach V'nerag B'Vestin, that Shedima, that went under the assumption that he was Mashiach, he was killed by Beis Din, which, by the way, is not very simple historically. That could be a mistake by the Rambam. He wasn't killed by the Beis Din, he was killed by Romans. Right? Okay, that's a conversation for another time. So according to this, the Jews killed Jesus. But it's very unlikely that Jews killed by crucifixion. That's not a very Jewish way of killing people, right? That's a Roman way of killing people. So, could be wrong, just didn't know. But let's go on. Kfar nisnabe bo Daniel. Daniel prophesies about such a person. Shnamar ubnei pritze amecha yinasu lahamid chazon v'nichshalu. Basically, the people that would want to have this vision and they will fail. V'chi yesh michshol gadol mizeh. Is there any great more stumbling block than Jesus? He said this guy was a major stumbling block for the Jewish people. It tripped up a lot of people, which is the birth of essentially Christianity. Shekol nevi'im dibru shamashiach goel Yisrael. The prophets all describe this Mashiach will redeem the Jewish people. Moshiach mekabetz nitchehem u'machazik mitzvatan. That what will he accomplish? He'll redeem them, he'll gather them, and he'll strengthen their mitzvahs. V'zeh garam labed Yisrael. And this guy, Jesus, what did he accomplish? He accomplished, I'll tell you what he accomplished, to destroy Israel. B'cherev. Because what's the Rambam referring to? The Crusades. He knows how much blood was spilt in the name of Christianity, in the name of Jesus, right? So he says this is a pretty big michshol if he was the cause of so much blood to be spilled. Of the fazir sheritam, and it scattered their remnants. And it actually convinced many of the world to err. Meaning, Christianity said, don't keep Torah mitzvah. Serve a foreign God. Aval, this is an unbelievable statement. The thoughts of God, we just don't understand the ways of God. Right? Quote from Pasuk that we know in Yeshayahu that we say on the Haftorah of a fast day. We don't understand God's ways. Why did God have him? Why did God put him in the world? What did he accomplish? I don't understand God's plan. So much blood was spilt by this error. So now who's referring to the Rambam? He's now referring to Muhammad. She'amad acharav, that came after him 600 years later. Einan ela lishe'er derech lamelech HaMashiach. Listen to this. So the Rambam says, do you know why there's Jesus and Muhammad? So the world will be prepared for Mashiach. Yasher derech lamelech HaMashiach. V'litaken et ha'olam. What will Jesus and Muhammad accomplish? It'll perfect the world. La'avodet Hashem b'yachad. Everyone can serve God, meaning, essentially, Christianity and Islam helped monotheism. So it took a pagan world, even though the Rambam writes that Christianity is a foreign God, nonetheless, it's sure better for every reason. It's a lot more to understand why and appreciate why. It changed the world from a pagan world into more of a monotheistic world. Now, how can we say that when he just said that Jesus is a foreign God? But anyways, that's for another time. But essentially, he's trying to say is that it still taught people to be much more monotheistic as opposed to the old world. Shnamar ki az efoch el hamim safa b'ra likro kulam b'shem Hashem ulavdo shechem echad. Okay, Kate said how. How did Christianity and Islam accomplish this? Let's go on. This is a bit off topic, but it's fun to read. Kvar nitmaleh olam kulom b'divrei Mashiach. Go anywhere in the world today and say, Messiah, everyone knows Messiah is. The Messiah concept spread like wildfire across the world. Not because of Tanakh, meaning not because of Jews, not because the entire world picked up Chidon Tanakh, but why is it the entire world understands the concept of Messiah, Messianic era? The reason is because of Christianity and Islam, which literally are on every single corner of the world. Right? Even more than Chabad. Because who spread Torah throughout the world? Who spread the Bible? Who are the Bible thumpers around the world? It was Christianity. It wasn't Judaism. Judaism didn't spread across the world. We didn't send missionaries, and we didn't send representatives of the world, right? The Christians did. So the Christians, to some extent, the Muslims also, there's a various points in history, although a little different, managed to literally reach every corner of the world. And again, not really every corner of the world. We know there are many places that didn't reach, but the vast majority of the world is aware of these ideas. And there he says there's a mila, there's something to that. It got them ready, it got them prepared from a headspace, psychological, religious, whatever word you want to use, for Mashiach. These far away lands, far away islands, they were uncircumcised heart. Because our mitzvot are true. Now, that's only true with Muslims. Christians don't think our mitzvot are true. So, anyways. And because of what the Muslims, Christians did, their old pagan ways have essentially disappeared. And we know that most of the world is Muslim Christian. There's other hidden messages here. Mashiach will come and reveal their mysteries. Eventually, these Christians, the Muslims, will be like, we were tricked all these years. We were fooled. We thought we were right. We were not. Says the Rambam, that will happen one day. But at least it's a process. You can't convince a population of the world overnight to go from 0 to 100. So it's a process. It takes 10 years, takes 20 years, 50 years, 100 years, hundreds of years, thousands, but eventually it'll get there. It's a process. And this is the beginning of the process. Okay. Fascinating. How many of you have ever read the Rambam before? You seen the Rambam before? No. Fascinating Rambam, huh? Fascinating Rambam. Very cool. What? Very cool Rambam. Yeah. Okay, that's why it's worthwhile reading word for word what he said inside, because in the beginning, he bashes and he comes out a little bit more, he tries to take what's positive about it. Again, he can't change it. The Rambam was a great man, but he ain't going to be able to eradicate Christianity in Islam. That's not going to work. Okay, so again, just to reiterate, the Rambam seems to hold like Shmuel, and Shmuel seems to imply Ein Bein Yemos Mashiach, except for Shabud Malchuyos. It's going to be just a what's it called? Just a political type of delivery. And let's take a look to see that inside. Let's look at the next language of the Rambam, because the truth really is the Perigud Aleph talks a little more about the resume, not really so much about what life is like. So let's take a look at what life will be like. Don't think for 1 second that the world will change. Don't think all of a sudden, the sun's going to rise in the west and set in the east. Not true. The world will be regular and normal. So again, if in Perigud Aleph we focused on the resume of the Mashiach, both what he needs to be like, what he needs to accomplish, the Rambam now is moving on to what will the Messianic world look like. This is our second question, right, for the Rambam. And what does he say? He holds like Shmuel, like the Gemara that we saw earlier, that what? Regular world. Now you're going to ask, wait a second. Rambam, what's the pasuk? V'gar ze'ev im keves. That's not normal. That's not a change in Teva? Of course it's a change in Teva. That a predator and what's the opposite of predator? Prey. Thank you. The predator and the prey will live in the same cage in peace. That's not a change in nature. So says the Rambam. Listen to this. Because the Rambam knows Tanakh. No. Parable. Allegory. So what does it mean? Again, I think we touched on this last week. Inyan hadavar shehiyu Yisrael yoshim levetach im rishei akum hamoshlim keze'evin amir. How should you understand Pesuk Yeshayahu? Allegory. What does it mean? The guys from Kevis, you know what that means? The Jewish people will live in tranquility with nations of the world who are as tough and who are as murderous and barbaric as a ze'ev, as an aryeh, as a namer. And who's the keves? Who's the gedi? Knesset Yisrael. That's what the Rambam says. I understand the Psukim in Shayahu allegorically. Now, Shayahu is speaking in very poetic terminology, right? So you could interpret it as literal, or you could interpret it as allegory. And says the Rambam, this needs to be understood allegorically. Shenamar ze'ev arevad yishtakifan. And his last line, Mashiach will be a mashal. Says the Raven, Al Yaleh Alev Shemot Mashiach and Mashiach Amar Avraham. So says the Raven. Wait a second. How can you say that? Halo Torah. The Torah says, Vishbati Chaya Ra'a Min Aretz. So says the Ravid, we have a problem. I understand, says the Ravid, if the Rambam wants to say that the Psukim in Yeshayahu are talking allegorically, Vigar Ze'evim Keves means that in the Yemosa Mashiach there'll be something normal, whatever normal is, it's just political freedom, not a change in nature. Although maybe you could say that if the nations of the world are peaceful with the Jews, there's a change in nature. But anyways, let's assume it's not. But don't assume that the animals will change their behavior. Says the Ravid, okay, that's fine. But the Rambam has to do with a pasuk not in Yeshayahu, but a pasuk in Sefer Vayikra. What does it say in Sefer Vayikra? Let's see the pasuk in its entirety. Flip the page to source 9. The pasuk says, "V'natati shalom ba'aretz." This is, we just read this in B'chukosai. U'chavtem v'in machri. There'll be peace in the land. There'll be no reason to be able to dwell in the land of Israel and have nothing to be fearful of, nothing to be concerned about. Vishbati chaya ramin aretz. So the word vishbati comes from the word Shabbat, which means to cease. And he'll cease to have wild animals in the land. V'cherev lo yavor bartzachem. Okay, so I understand that's military, that's political. But, says the Ravid, how can the Rambam say that life is going to be normal in Moshe Mashiach? Doesn't it say in the Torah? Forget Yeshayahu. But you're going to interpret a pasuk in the Torah as an allegory. When it says, Vishpati chaya min haaretz means, do we know the wild animals will cease to live here? That's the Ravid's question on the Rambam. How would you
support for the literal?
Which is a support for the literal understanding of the pasuk. So first of all, we see here, and this, by the way, is a topic for another time, is, are you allowed to interpret psukim in the Torah literally? Sorry, allegorically, and not literally. Can you deviate from the literal interpretation? Could be, there's a machlokes in the Rambam and the Ravid. It could be, although you don't have to argue this, as we'll see in a minute. The Rambam says you can interpret allegorically. The Ravid is very bothered and says, yeah, Rambam, you want to interpret a pasuk in the Nevi'im allegorically? I'll give you that. But you're going to take a pasuk, Vishpati chaya ra'a min haaretz, and say that's an allegory? That, the Ravid says, I'm not prepared to do. And therefore, it appears the Ravid is arguing that in the Messianic era, there will be a miraculous type of change in nature. You don't have to interpret that way, as we'll see in a minute. Who just gets up now? So, it's not so simple. Why isn't it simple? Because comes along the Ramban. The Ramban, in source 10, says, wait a second, how do I understand this pasuk in Chumash? So take a look. Vishpati, see here, go to source 10, second paragraph. Vishpati chaya min haaretz. Aldad Rabbi Yehuda. So the truth is, this is from Torah Kohanim. It's a midrash that says what? She'amar ma'avirim min halam. So again, so what does the pasuk mean? Excuse me. Vishpati chaya min haaretz. So how would you translate that literally? Vishpati chaya ra'a min haaretz. How is that understood literally? What does that mean to you?
Wild animals will come to rest.
Wild animals will cease, will come to rest in your land. Now, what could that mean? Understand it literally? How could you understand it literally? But not messianically.
They'll no longer have their wilds instinct.
Okay, so that appears to be, is that miraculous or not miraculous? But that sounds miraculous, no? So says the Ramban, says, let me quote to you, a machlok is what this pasuk means. Rabbi Yehuda says, Ma'avirin min holam. We know more wild animals in the world. Wow. Who? Kipshuto. But that's the first interpretation. Is that miraculous? There'll be no more wild animals. Second one is, Shelo yavo chayot ve'ot bartzam. No! There'll be wild animals, but these wild animals won't live in Israel. Live in Jordan. Live in Egypt.
Min haaretz.
Min haaretz. What's min haaretz? Min Eretz Yisrael. And what does he say? He says, let me explain to you why. So again, the first interpretation is Rabbi Yehuda. That appears to be some type of miraculous, non-natural behavior. But then says the Ramban, who says, what are you talking about? I'll give you another Tana. I was going to say, they're just going to come to Israel. Now, you might say that's miraculous. What do you mean? No wild animals. Is that miraculous? No. Says the Ramban, no. I'll tell you why. Ki behiyot hasova. Because for the Ramban, the Messianic era will be filled with a sense of satiation. There'll be tons of food everywhere. Ubirabot hatova. There'll be tons of goodness, physical sustenance. Vehiyot ha'arim meleot adam. Since the cities will be filled with people, because there'll be so much, there'll be an economic boom in Israel, so therefore there'll be tons of people filled with inhabitants. Lo tavona chayot b'yeshuv. Where did wild animals go? Wild animals go to places. Wild animals live in the forest. Why would a wild animal leave their forest and enter into the city or the village? Why? They need food. So if there's a famine and they're dying, if there's nothing growing where they live, they need to go into where humans live. And why does a bear come to guys who are camping? Because they need food. They smell food. They want food. So if they have enough food, why would they leave their habitat for? No one wants to schlep, right? Like if you have kosher food at Shepherd, why would you go to Steele's? If kosher food at Steele's, why would you go to Lawrence? You have food right there. Why would you go somewhere else? Right? No one wants to schlep, just like humans don't want to schlep. Bears don't want to schlep. Animals want to schlep. But there's no food here. Then they have to go find food. So says the Ramban, what does it mean that there'll be no wild animals in your land? There will be wild animals. Where? But they'll stay in the forests. They'll stay in the uninhabited areas. But in the land where you live and where you dwell, there'll be no wild animals because there'll be so much affluence, there'll be so much food and prosperity, there's no need to come. What do they bother humans for? That's how the Ramban understands it.
I thought you were saying that all the wild land will turn into inhabited land. So we'll take away all the natural habitats of these wild animals. And because wild animals can't live in inhabited land, they'll just leave. There's so many people, there's going to be economic prosperity.
Okay, I didn't think of that. Okay, that could also be right into Ramban. Yeah, could be. There'll be so much animals that the people will take over all the green. It's very unenvironmental, very good for environmentalism here, right? You cut down the trees, cut down the forest, the animals leave, right? Okay, so maybe that's what it's trying to say. We'll cut down all the forests in order to make room for the people because of prosperity. So where the animals go, they'll go to Jordan, they'll go to Egypt, they'll go to Syria, Turkey, not Lebanon. They're not going to be in Israel because there'll be nowhere for them to live because there'll be houses everywhere. Okay, could be. I didn't think of that, but that actually makes a lot of sense too. But it doesn't really matter to some extent. What I'm trying to say is there's machlokas in the Ramban, how to understand. The Ramban brings both opinions. So Ravid, what do you want from the Ramban? The Ravid is upset at the Ramban because he interpreted a pasuk from Yeshayahu allegorically, and then what did he bring as a kasha? This pasuk, that what will happen, there'll be no wild animals. But that doesn't mean miraculous. It can be very normal. So the Rambam could say to the Ravid, I can still interpret psukim in the Torah literally. I don't have to make psukim in the Torah into an allegory. Yeshayahu, allegory. But I can even interpret psukim in the Torah literally and not have a problem with this pasuk. Why? What do you want from me? What will happen? There'll be prosperity. The animals will leave. That's pshat the psukim. It doesn't have that. The Ramban even said that. Right? So what do you want from me? That's how the Rambam could respond to the Ravid. Now, we know that the Rambam Shita is often to interpret psukim allegorically. We know that by Ma'aseh Bereishis he does that, right? But could be Ma'aseh Bereishis as one status, and other psukim have a different status. But right, so we touched on this a little bit last week, so I don't want to. I'll go back to it now. But we see from here again, what will the world be like? Was it going to be this miraculous world, or is it going to be a natural world? The Rambam's approach is it's going to be the world of Mashiach will be a natural world. There is a mention Is it leave? Okay, go. We'll see. No problem. We'll be done in a couple minutes. We'll 10:40. Okay. We do have mention of a potential stira, contradiction to this Rambam. The Rambam writes elsewhere that hang on a second. Where's that? Where'd it go? Oh, here we go. The Rambam in Hilchot Tshuva, there it is, number 5. It was right there, I just missed it. The Rambam writes in Hilchot Tshuva, there appears to be something miraculous in Yemot HaMashiach. What is it? Take a look. Kol tovot shemitnab'im behem anvi'im Yisrael einam ela dvarim shebaguf. V'nim behem Yisrael Yemot HaMashiach. Says the Ramban that what the psukim in the Navi are talking about Yemot HaMashiach, which again the Rambam felt they weren't talking about Olam Haba. In Yemot HaMashiach, we're going to live, we're going to breathe, our heart will be, we're going to eat and drink. B'zman the Shuv HaMamshal Yisrael Aval Tovat Chayei Olam Haba Ein LaErach V'Dimayon V'Lo Damua HaNvi'im K'dei Shelo Yifchatu Atan B'Dimayon. But the Nevi'im never spoke about Olam Haba. That's like a different world.